Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really getting into something fascinating, an ancient text.
How these rules, these guidelines for monks and nuns actually came about, how they responded to, well, real life.
Exactly. And the story we're starting with,
Mm.
it involves quite a bit. An unexpected request, public anger, even, believe it or not, naked monks showing up.
It definitely highlights that tension, doesn't it, between the spiritual ideal and just practical reality.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Picture the scene. Savatthi Jetavana Monastery. This is during the Buddhist time.
And we have this figure, Venerable Upananda Sakyaputta, apparently quite a gifted speaker, known for his Dharma talks.
So after one of his talks, this wealthy man's son comes up, very impressed, and he makes a general offer, anything you need, robes, food, medicine.
A generous offer seems straightforward.
You'd think. But Upananda, he doesn't just say thank you. He immediately asks specifically for a saikya, a robe.
Right there on the spot.
Yes. And he keeps asking, even when the son says, look, I'll send you a much nicer one from home.
Wow, so he's really pressing him.
He is, until the son, feeling pressured, just gives him a robe then and there and leaves.
Okay, I can already see where this might be going. It's creating an awkward situation.
Very awkward. And it doesn't go unnoticed. People see the son leaving, maybe looking a bit bare himself, and the criticism starts.
Ah, the public reaction.
Yeah, people start saying these Sakyaputta ascetics, the Buddhist followers, are greedy, never satisfied. They're even saying it makes them hesitant to invite monks for Dharma talks.
Because they're worried they'll just get asked for stuff immediately after.
Exactly. Taking a robe right after an invitation to teach, it looked bad. Really bad.
And this must have caused ripples within the monastic community itself.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Monks described as apicca. Those who are content, with few wishes, they were genuinely concerned. This wasn't just gossip. It hit at the core values.
It's about reputation, but also about the internal standard, the ideal they were striving for.
Right. So word gets back to the Buddha. He calls Upananda in, asks him about it.
And confirms the key point.
Confirms the key point.
Yeah.
The layperson was anyatako, not a relative. This wasn't family helping family.
Okay. And this incident leads directly to
the very first rule, the Sikkhapada, about this specific issue.
The Buddha lays it down. What was it exactly?
He says, if any bhikkhu solicits a robe from an unknown householder or householder's wife, it is Nissaggiya pācittiya.
And Nissaggiya pācittiya isn't trivial. It means you have to forfeit the item, right? And confess.
Precisely. Forfeit and confess. The message was clear. Don't even look greedy, especially towards strangers.
So, okay, rule established. Seems logical. Problem solved.
Well, not quite. As often happens, fixing one problem can sometimes create another unforeseen one.
Ah, what happened next?
We get this story. A group of monks are traveling from Nissaggiya to Savatthi. Pretty standard journey.
Okay.
But on the way, they get robbed at Chindisa. Their robes are stolen. They're left with nothing.
Oh, wow. Stranded and without robes. That's serious.
Extremely serious. But here's the twist. Because of this brand new rule about not soliciting from unknown people.
They hesitate, even in that situation.
They hesitate. They don't want to break the rule, even though they're desperate.
That's incredible dedication, but practical consequences.
The practical consequence is they arrive in Savatthi, completely naked.
Naked. Seriously.
Stark naked.
Yeah.
It must have been quite a shock.
I can only imagine. What did the other monks think?
Initially, they were confused. They thought they were ajivikas, another group of ascetics who were known for going naked sometimes. They couldn't believe they were fellow bhikkhus.
So total confusion. Who sorted it out?
Venerable Upali. He's often the one dealing with Vinaya matters. He investigates, confirms, yes, these are bhikkhus, and tells the others, quick, give them some robes.
Okay, so they get robes eventually, but was that the end of it?
Not entirely. Even after getting robes, some monks were still critical, saying, well, they shouldn't have arrived naked. They could have covered themselves with grass or leaves or something.
A bit harsh, perhaps, given the circumstances.
Maybe, but it shows how seriously they took decorum. But this whole incident reaches the Buddha.
And his reaction, this is key.
His reaction is compassionate and very practical. He recognizes that the strict rule, while well-intentioned, just didn't work in these extreme, unavoidable situations.
It created undue hardship.
Exactly. A rule needs to account for the messy reality of life sometimes.
So this leads to a change, an amendment.
Yes, an amendment was clearly needed. The Buddha modifies the rule.
How so? What's the modification?
He permits a bhikkhu whose robe has been stolen at Kinakavaro or lost Nahakavarasa to actually solicit a robe from an unknown person.
So an exception for emergencies. Makes sense.
But And this is important. There are conditions, caveats.
Okay, like what?
If, when they reach the first inhabited place, there are sangha robes or coverings available, maybe a spare community robe, or even things like floor coverings or cushion covers, they should use those first.
With the intention of returning them.
Yes, intending to return them. But if nothing like that is available from the community stores,
Then what?
then they must cover themselves with grass or leaves. Arriving completely naked, even after being robbed, is still considered a minor offense, a dukkaya.
So, maintain decorum if at all possible, even with basic materials. Soliciting is allowed in dire need, but nakedness is still frowned upon if any covering can be found.
Precisely. It's this careful balancing act.
So the final revised rule reflects this nuance.
Perfectly. It becomes, if any bhikkhu solicits a robe from an unknown householder or householder's wife, except at the proper time, it is Nissaggiya pācittiya.
And defining that proper time.
The proper time is when a bhikkhu's robe has been stolen or lost. It acknowledges the exception right there in the rule itself.
That's fascinating. It shows a legal system evolving through precedent, through real cases.
It really does. And the level of detail they went into with definitions is just remarkable. It wasn't vague at all.
What kind of definitions are we talking about?
We'll take anyatako, meaning unknown. It wasn't just someone you didn't know well. It was defined legally, not related by your mother or father going back 7 generations.
Wow, that's specific. 7 generations.
Yep. And gahapati or gahapatani, householder or his wife, simply meant anyone living in a house. Simple, practical.
No complex class distinctions there, just lives in a house.
Right. And kivara, robe, referred to specific types of robes suitable for monks, not just any old cloth.
And that key phrase, anyatra samaya, except at the proper time.
That was the crucial qualifier, explicitly allowing for the exceptions we just talked about.
It's like legal language anywhere, needing that precision. And the exceptions themselves were detailed, stolen or lost.
Very detailed. A kinakavaro, robe stolen could be by anyone, kings, thieves, whoever.
Okay.
And not hakavaro, robe lost that covered a whole range, burnt by fire, swept away by water, eaten by rats or termites.
Termites, they really thought of everything.
Or even just worn out through normal use. All valid reasons falling under lost.
That comprehensiveness is impressive. What about the offense itself? You mentioned dukkaya and Nissaggiya pācittiya.
Right. So if you solicit outside the proper time, the act of asking is initially a minor offense, a dukkaya.
Just for asking.
Just for asking.
Huh.
But if you actually receive the robe you solicited improperly.
Then it becomes the more serious Nissaggiya pācittiya.
Exactly. At that point, the forfeiture kicks in. The robe is nissaggiya, forfeit.
And that forfeiture process, you said it wasn't necessarily about losing the robe permanently?
Correct. It was more symbolic, a restorative justice kind of thing. The monk confesses, formally gives up the robe to the sangha or a group or even one other monk, and then usually the sangha gives it right back to him to use. It's the act of acknowledging the rule, the mistake, and setting it right. That's key.
That's a really interesting mechanism. It's about accountability and reintegration, not just punishment.
Definitely. And they even considered the monk's state of mind, their perception. Well, if you solicited from someone you thought was unknown, even if they secretly turned out to be, say, your long-lost cousin, if it was outside the proper time, it was still an Nissaggiya pācittiya upon receiving the robe.
So your perception, your intention based on what you believed mattered more than the objective fact in that case.
It seems so for that specific offense. Conversely, if you solicited from a known relative, but you were maybe doubtful or mistakenly thought they were unknown, that was just a minor dukkaya.
Less serious because the underlying relationship was actually okay for receiving things.
Seems to be the logic. And of course, soliciting from a known relative, knowing they're a relative, no offense at all.
Right. And were there other clear no offense situations, the inapati?
Yes, several important ones. Obviously, soliciting at the proper time, robe stolen or lost. That's the main exception.
Makes sense.
Also, soliciting from relatives, as we just mentioned, or from people who had already made a specific offer of support, the pavaratana. They essentially gave prior permission.
Ah, like the initial offer from the rich man's son, if Upananda hadn't pushed it, perhaps, or if someone said, ask me anytime.
Exactly. Also, no offense if you're soliciting for another monk's benefit, not your own.
Interesting. Acting for the community.
Or if you were using your own money to acquire the robe.
Yeah.
And crucially, exceptions for someone considered insane and for the first offender.
Like Upananda himself, before the rule existed.
Precisely. You can't be held accountable for breaking a rule that hasn't been made yet. Shows a sense of fairness, really.
Absolutely. So if we sort of zoom out and connect this to the bigger picture, what does this whole story tell us?
I think it shows really vividly how practical these ancient codes had to be. They weren't just abstract ideals handed down from on high.
Right, they were hammered out through real-world problems, trial and error, like the naked monks incident forcing a rethink.
Exactly. It's this constant balancing act. You have the ideal non-attachment, simplicity, not being greedy, but then you have the reality monks get robbed, things wear out, people have needs.
And the rules had to evolve to accommodate that reality without completely abandoning the ideal. The amendment process itself is key.
It really is. It shows the importance of adapting guidelines based on actual experience, not just sticking rigidly to something that's causing unforeseen harm or difficulty.
Which makes you think, doesn't it? This raises a really important question for us today. How do we balance ideals with practical needs in our organizations, communities, maybe even our own lives?
That's a great point. Think about any set of rules or guidelines, company policies, community standards, even family rules.
Right.
How often do unexpected situations force us to reconsider them?
All the time. Circumstances change, things happen that nobody predicted when the rule was written. And this story, this specific case from thousands of years ago, it really drives home the idea that rules and their exceptions are intrinsically linked. You almost can't have a functioning system without considering the exceptions, the proper time for things to be different. It makes you wonder how many of our own rules came about because someone, somewhere, made a mistake, faced the consequences, and prompted a more nuanced, compassionate approach.